My name is Hazel. I'm a Pilates instructor and therapist at Mountain Massage Company in the UK, and this is the second part of our dynamic intermediate reformer class. So you will find part 1 on our YouTube channel, and this is part 2. So you can either do this as a standalone class or you can tag it onto part 1 for a longer class. But this is not a beginner class, this is an intermediate to advanced class, so we expect you to be robust enough to follow this through. As always, if anything doesn't feel right, please try a different movement instead. Okay, you can have 1 to 2 springs on for this next sequence, and my foot bar's in a higher position, so I've probably got about 1 unit on, okay, so depending on the springs on your reformer, 1 to 2 springs. And we're going to start with our knee, flat back knee stretches. So bottom sitting towards our heels, foot bar in a high position, shoulders just sitting back from the hands here, but we're nice and solid with that connection between the shoulder blades, chin tuck, neck long. Body stays where it is. We're going to start to push the feet back and draw that carriage back in underneath that. So pushing the feet back to extend through the hips, and then using the abdominals to draw that carriage back in. So with this next couple of exercises, slightly heavier spring is going to make it slightly more stable, and a lighter spring will make it a bit harder, make it a bit unstable. So things to watch with this one is that the body's not drifting. We want to try and keep the body nice and still, so you need to brace through the arms, you need that shoulder blade connection, and let's just make sure that we're lengthening through the back of the neck, nice and strong and proud through the back of that neck. Lovely. Good. And then we're going to go for our knees off. So I actually might just add the security of a little spring, just because I'm recording this class quite early, first thing in the morning. And I've actually not just done the other class. No, that's too much, I'm going to take that one off. Okay. No, I'm happy with my original choice. But if you did need an extra sort of bit of spring change for this next bit, please do so. So this is when we're going to hover the knees off, we're going to extend through the legs, and then draw the carriage back in. So we're coming into our plank. I'm just going to try it with a different spring. So obviously most of you would probably have done the first part, so I've just gone on to a slightly heavier spring. I'm going to find that a little bit easier. No, it's too easy. Oh, I don't know, I can't make my mind up this morning. I'm going to go back to my original choice. Hopefully you guys will be settled on the spring and be happy. Let's just do a couple more. So it's a little bit like our leg pulling prone prep on the floor, on the back work. And you can do 1 at a time, or we can add a few in. So breathing out, breathing in. Yeah, I'm just going to do 1 more. And coming back in. Fantastic. Oh, you might end up doing a couple more. I don't feel properly warmed up for that one yet. We're going to come into our elephant. So we're going to come and have a little stand on our reformer. So depending on our hamstring length, this is going to depend on where our foot position is really. So sort of how stiff we are, or stretchy we are, bendy we are. But with our elephant, we want to think about the back and the arms kind of being nice and long. Now, I'm not the most flexible person, so I probably can't get into that flat back position as well as some other people. So I always struggle with this one a little bit, but ideally the weight should be kind of back over your legs. So rather than kind of be in this sort of half plank position, we want to bring the weight back, bring the hips back. The arms are extended, so adjust your foot bar if you need to. The fingers are all over the foot bar rather than gripping. And the idea is we keep this flat back position and we press the back of the legs back and then draw it back underneath us. So the movement's a little bit like that sort of knee stretch that we just did, isn't it? To start with. So we want to think about keeping the upper body nice and still. And now, depending on our flexibility, our tightness, what we should find is as we draw this carriage back underneath us using the abdominals, we maybe get a little bit of stretch down through the hamstrings. So I'm pretty stiff and tight, so I get quite a strong stretch down through these hamstrings. I'm just tucking my chin a little bit. I realised I was looking forward then. And the lighter the spring, obviously the more unstable the carriage is, and the more we have to use that core control, the heavier the spring, probably the more stretch you'll get. So there's pluses and minuses to both really. But we're thinking about keeping that flat back position, so shoulders away from the ears. Think about that spine being as straight as it can be. Obviously I'm a little bit limited with that. And we press the back of the legs back, and then we draw that carriage back underneath us. So we're trying to keep the body and the spine kind of nice and stable and steady through this bit. Let's just go with a couple more. And if you need to stand a little bit more into the middle, that's absolutely fine. And I'm going to take this into a little bit more of an oblique movement now. So I'm going to come and stand with my feet pointing towards the opposite corner of my carriage. So my feet are on a slight angle here, so I'm standing both feet over towards one side of my headrest, but I'm trying to angle my body still kind of into the centre, so I'm sort of twisted slightly. And same thing, I'm going to send the legs away and draw them back in. Okay, send the legs away and draw them back in. So this isn't kind of the, this isn't really a version of the snake. We're not really taking the carriage all the way out into a full plank. That would kind of make it a slightly different move really. But this is just sort of waking up the oblique muscles a little bit. So those are the crisscrossy abdominal muscles. A couple more on this side. And it just gets a little bit of a different stretch. So this is a way of kind of lengthening some of the tissue as well, getting a bit of stretch. And again, I'm just coming and standing my feet at a bit of an angle, pointing towards the opposite side of my carriage. I'm trying to position and rotate my body to face down towards the floor, down towards the foot bar. Oh, I'm finding it a little bit easier on this side. Again, as I'm recording this, it's pretty early in the morning on a pretty sort of damp November morning, and it's pretty early, so I'm just easing my way into some of these movements. Good. And I've still just got one spring on. I'm using kind of one medium spring, but I'd say 1 to 2 springs for this part of the class is fine. There we go, okay. Alright, so that was just sort of stretching us and warming us up for the single leg version. So I'm staying on the same spring. Again, if you feel unstable, add something on. But let's go for a bit of single leg. So this is where we have to extend a leg out behind us. And again, some of you will be sort of slightly stronger than me. So again, try to bring the weight back. Equal weight through the arms, tuck the chin, lengthen through the spine, and we're sending that leg back and drawing it back underneath us. Sending that leg back and drawing it back underneath us. So I'm trying to lift my leg nice and high at the back there. It's probably drifting slightly. I'm determined to show the world that Pilates can be done by people that are very, very stiff and not very flexible. You don't have to be an amazing kind of or current dancer in order to do Pilates. It's suitable for everybody. Last couple here. And pop that leg back in. Let's change it over. Ooh, send this one out behind us. So try to keep the hips angled, facing down at the front. So So both the pointy, sticky outy bits of your pelvis are facing down towards the floor. I'm trying to work out if my arm rotated. And we're pressing back through that back leg and then drawing that carriage back underneath us. Pressing back through that back leg and drawing underneath us. Let's go for a couple more. Lengthen through the spine, push the foot bar away. Oh, I'm just going to do one more. And back in. Okay. Woohoo! So we're moving on to a little bit of our chest stretch. So I'm going to come and face the back of the reformer. I actually might go for a spin change here, so I'm going to want to work my upper body like a tiny bit more. So I might just put on a quarter spring there. So I've now got 2 on. So that's probably only equivalent of a unit. I've got some very odd. I've got some quite oddly weighted springs on my reformer. But probably 1 to 2 springs is fine. So we're going to go for our chest stretch. So I'm going to come into high kneeling because this is a more intermediate to advanced one. You can of course be down in low kneeling or seated on the reformer, but we're going to face the back of the reformer. You're coming in having a grip of the ropes or the cleats, and we're going to pull those ropes back, bring the hands down by the hips, getting that connection in the back of the body, so the shoulder blades draw together as we draw that carriage back. Now, let's make sure we're not swinging the body on this one. We really do want to keep that body nice and upright, and the work wants to be done through the arms. So if the spring's too heavy, we end up kind of like sort of forcing and kind of thrusting the upper body a little bit. So if that's happening, just lighten your spring setting slightly so that you can isolate the movement with just your arms. So as we're bringing the arms back on this time, we're going to hold out there and we're going to look left, look right, and then allow the carriage to return. So drawing the shoulder blades together, nice and strong through the back of the body, putting in that little bit of head rotation. And as we're doing this, let's try and be nice and wide and open through the front of the shoulders. So making sure we're not hunching into this, be nice and wide and smiley through those clavicles, through those collarbones at the front of your body. And we're just getting that connection through the back of the body. I'm going to do a couple more. And one more. And I'm going to stay in, I'm going to come down into low kneeling, I think, for this one. We'll try it in high kneeling in a minute. I'm going to cross over my ropes now. I'm still going to do high kneeling, I think. And we can just go, and we'll go for a little bit of our row, but we're going to go into a little bit of single arm row. So you can pop one rope down to the side for a moment if you want to. And we're going to go for a single arm row. Actually, let me do it on the other side and then I can show you what I'm doing. So I'm holding the rope in my opposite hand and I'm going to hold the cleat here. So you can either be in high kneeling, low kneeling or seated. Okay, and we're going to bring that elbow across. And let's just start with the arm movement. Other arm can be out in front, that's fine. So we're rowing that arm back, so we're putting in. So at first, try and stay facing forward, but we're actually going to add in a little bit of rotation with this. So you can allow yourself to be pulled as that rope pulls you back, and I'm going to rotate to the opposite side, and then I'm going to start with that arm movement, and then follow it in with the body movement. So I'm getting a little bit of rotation as I'm rowing that arm. My elbow is probably just coming out to the side slightly, but shoulder stays down, elbow stays low, so we're not overworking those upper traps. And if you want to, if you feel secure enough, you could come into that high kneeling. And again, if you feel like the body is starting to bow and sway a little bit, then maybe just ease your spring setting down just slightly, just take a little bit of weight off. So we're single arm rowing, but with a bit of rotation. So obviously any dizziness, we can just stay facing forwards. And actually that's probably a little bit more functional, isn't it? Because as we walk and run, we don't sort of rotate our head from side to side. So staying facing forwards with our head and our neck is probably a little bit more functional. We want that lovely long line through the spine. I'm just going to go for a couple more. And then let's swap sides. So I'm taking the rope in my opposite hand, and let's just start with the arm movement, isolating that first. So my body's facing forward to begin with. I'll get this arm out of the way, it's probably confusing. And all I'm doing is leading with the elbow as I draw that arm back. And then we can start with a little bit of rotation. So I'm going to allow that rope to pull me around to the side, hopefully staying nice and long and tall through the spine. I'm going to stay facing forward actually with my head. And then I'm going to draw the elbow back, but as I do so, I'm going to follow that through with a little bit of spinal rotation. And I'm going to reach this arm through, mostly for balance really. So, as we draw that arm back, I'm getting that bit of rotation. So again, we're bringing the oblique muscles into play slightly. So I definitely don't rotate as well on this side. I find it very sticky. I'm going to do 2 more. And 1 for luck. And popping the ropes back down there. And we're going to come into a little bit of our cat hips and our cat arms. So did I put another spring on? I did, didn't I? I'm going to take that off. So I'm going back down to 1 spring for my cat hips and my cat arms. So coming and having a little sort of moment in 4-point kneeling. So we're going to have our hands on the rails here. And just take maybe a couple of little cat-cow stretches just here, just to mobilise that spine after we've been in one position for a little while. And then from this 4-point kneeling position, so my knees are kind of at the shoulder pads here, I'm going to walk the hands forward on the rails. So I haven't shifted my weight forward, I've just got my hands forward. Shoulders are back and down, connected at the back of the body. And then I'm going to drag that carriage to meet my hands and then control it back. So my weight, it should be, hopefully, staying over my hips and my knees. And I'm pulling through the arms to close the space down at the armpit. I'm going to walk my hands a little bit more forward just to make it slightly tougher. So the further you walk your hands away, the harder it's going to be. Obviously, the heavier the spring, the harder it's going to be. So this is for our sort of the muscles around our shoulders and our under our armpits, so our lats and kind of our muscles in our mid-back as well. We want to tuck that chin, neck nice and long, so the head doesn't sort of droop down to the floor. Remember to breathe, breathing out, breathing in. Let's do 4 more. Keeping that tabletop. As soon as I put a number on, I immediately lose count. Let's do 1 more. And coming back in there. Okay, really nice. So we're going to just change that movement up and make it a little bit more lower abdominal dominant. So this time, same start position. So from that 4-point kneeling, walk the hands forward, hold onto the handrails. We're going to bring the carriage out a little bit, hold it there, but now it's our hips that are going to move. So arms and shoulders are going to stay where they are. I actually might need to just shuffle my knees back a little bit. we're going to allow the hips to open and then draw the carriage back underneath. So arms and shoulders are going to stay where they are. We're allowing the knees to sort of move back, and then we're dragging that carriage back underneath us with our knees. So the arms and the shoulders are having to work here, but we're making it a little bit more lower abdominal dominant by moving from the hips. So the hips open at the front as the knees drift backwards, and then they're closing down using the abdominals as we draw the knees back underneath us. Let's go for 3 more. Actually, let's go for a couple more because I've speeded up now. Let's go for 3 more from here. Last one. And walk those hands back, take a little shell pose if we need to. So that's our cat hips and our cat arms. We're going to come into our side arms. So I'm going to stay on the same spring. So in fact, we've been on the same spring for a little while now, haven't we? Come on to the same, I'm going to stay on the same spring from here, but I might need to change down because I've actually got a slight issue on my shoulders, so I'm going to see how this feels. Now I'm going to come into high kneeling with this one, and for the first bit I want a little bit of tension down through the rope there, so I'm sort of roughly, I guess I'm probably roughly in the middle of my carriage. So arm is going to stay kind of sort of slightly nestled into the side of your ribs here. So we're sort of not out here to begin with. We kind of got that elbow sort of tucked into the ribs a little bit. And we're coming into a little bit of our internal rotation. So we want to bring the hand kind of across the body and then allow it to open out. And I want you to just have a little glance down at your ribs, at your wrist. It's early. I want you to stay nice and stiff through that wrist. So again, watch the body sway, because if this rope is if your spring setting is too high, you're going to be kind of like having to lean into it a little bit, and it really should be quite a subtle, small movement. So I'm actually getting a little bit of lean. So I'm going to change things. So I'm going to go down to a lighter spring here. So the idea with these ones is we're isolating really small muscles around the shoulder complex. So it shouldn't be a huge global movement. We're getting a little bit of core activation because we're in our high kneeling. So you can obviously do this in low kneeling, you can do this in sitting as well, that's absolutely fine. But obviously this is a bit more of a intermediate advanced class, so we're in high kneeling. But the movement really is to work tiny little muscles in our rotator cuff. So that's the muscles that stabilise the shoulder. I'm just going to go for one more. And then I'm going to take the rope into my opposite hand. So I've got I'm going to put my hand through the lead and hold just around the cleats here. And I've just moved closer to my shoulder pads as well. So with this one, oh yeah, there we go. So now we're going for a bit of external rotation. I just had to glance down at my springs then because this feels really hard, but it's just, as I say, my shoulders. So the idea is the elbow stays nestled into the ribs. Oh, I might have to help myself out on this one. We want that wrist to stay nice and stiff and strong, okay, not bendy. And we're opening the carriage out to the side. You want to think about staying open through the collarbones, through the clavicles. So I'm actually struggling with this, so I'm sort of giving myself a little hand, initiating that movement. And I'm only going to go for a couple more because I'm finding this one quite tough on this spring. So again, if you're finding it hard, you could go down a spring, couldn't you? Or I'm just going to help myself out just slightly. And last one there for external rotation. All right, and let's try our, what do we call this? PNF, it's something about neuromuscular firing pattern in APPI Pilates, but in other types of Pilates they call this drawing the sword. so which I think is a slightly better name. So, okay, so the hand is going to start from the opposite hip here. So my palm is facing in to my opposite hip. And then I'm going to drag my hand across the body, so I'm leading from the elbow, dragging the hand across the body. Then I'm rotating, and I'm going to open out to the sky and come back down. Oh, I'm just going to get rid of that rope, because I think that was caught up there. So, you can make this easier by going onto the longer leap as well, actually, so I might do that. Oh, that's loads easier. There we go. Okay, so, starting from the opposite hip, palm facing in, lead from the elbow, ooh, elbow comes out to the side, hand drags across the body, then we open that hand up towards the sky. So imagine you've got your sword in your sword belt, and we're going to draw that sword out and hold it high in the air, hence the name. So lead with the elbow, drag the hand across the body, open it high into the sky. My husband calls this the Saturday night fever. So you could channel your inner Travolta. Shoulders down, chin tucked. Let's do 2 more. And pop that down there. All right, we will come back and do the other side in a moment. So there's a few options there to make it kind of slightly easier, slightly harder. I'm going to come back into a bit of our long stretch. So because I went down a spring for the side arm series, so I'm just going to go back up to what I was on before. So for me that's a medium. Oh yeah, that one's quite a strong spring. Anyway, here we go. Okay. I'm just muttering to myself. We're going to go for a little bit of our long stretch. So start with the similar position that we did the others back at the beginning of this section. So hands on the footbar's in a high position. I've got 1 medium spring on, so you've probably got 1 to 2 springs on for this section. Chin tucked, heels sitting back towards the hips sitting back towards the heels to begin with. Gonna think about raising the knees off and sending that carriage away to begin with. So we're in our plank position, and then I'm going to move through the arms. So I'm going to drag myself over the footbar, closing that armpit space down, and then I'm going to push myself away from the footbar. Oh, I think I've got a rope trapped somewhere. Let's see if it gets itself out of the way. There we go. I think it's got itself out of the way now. Good. So I'm pushing myself away from the footbar, and then I'm dragging myself back over it. So obviously this is a pretty strong one. You can come down to your knees at any point. But this is a more intermediate to advanced class. I'm going to go for 3 more. Last one. Coming all the way back in, allowing the hips and the knees to return back down. And just allow the hands to roll a couple of times, just to ease out those wrists, because it's quite strong on the wrists, that one. And we're going to come into our dynamic pigeon. So with this, there's a few ways to get in and out of pigeon, and obviously if pigeon isn't right for you, if there's any hip or knee issues, you can do different type of glute stretch, or you can just do some cat-cows there for a moment. But if you are okay in the hip and the knee department, so what we tend to do is bring both feet over to one side. I'm going to send that leg away between the shoulder pads. So we've got one knee kind of in the middle of the carriage a little bit. And we kind of sink our hips down so we get a little bit of a stretch through that hip, through that glute. And we're going to make this a little bit dynamic. So we're going to stretch ourselves away, looking down to the floor. And then I'm going to bring this into a bit of a cobra. So as I bring the carriage in, I'm going to kind of rear up a little bit and look over towards the wall and window in front of me. And then as I push the carriage away, I'm going to melt down and look down towards the floor there. So shoulders stay down and away, and we kind of restack our spine as we come into this sort of, I guess it's a little bit of a cobra move, isn't it? With a pigeon, dynamic pigeon. So we're getting a little bit of spinal extension through that mid-back. But just with this one, just make sure we're not kind of craning through the neck. So we still want to keep that chin tucked and the shoulders back and down. But we're kind of rearing up to look over the foot bar and then pushing that away to get more of the glute stretch, the hip stretch. Oh, that feels lovely. Okay, to come out of this one, we want to try and come out of it without just pressing down through this sort of bent leg, because we're in a little bit of a compressed position here. So we're going to use the arms and the legs to come out of this. So hands can come onto the carriage, your knee can bend at the back, and we push ourselves up, and then we can swap legs from there. Okay, just so we're not pushing away with that bent knee, just because it's a little bit bent and compressed. It probably isn't going to feel so great if we do that. So both feet over to the opposite side. I'm going to send that leg away through the gap in between the shoulder pads. Sink myself down. I'm pretty stiff on this side, so I'm probably not going to get down too low. Hands are going to be up on the foot bar here. And let's push that carriage away, folding forward. And then let's come into that little cobra. So hands can be straight, arms can be straight, or you can bend the elbows a little bit if that helps you get a little bit more of that spinal extension. And remember, if you ever do any of our videos, it's always good to remind people that my elbows don't fully lock out actually, so I'm probably never going to look like I've got a perfectly straight arm, because I'm always going to be a little bit bent in the elbow department. Okay. So I feel a lot stiffer on this side, so I'm going to tuck my chin a little bit, draw my shoulders back and down, and really concentrate on trying to kind of stack up. So actually I'm just going to look down to that skirting board level, because I think that's going to help me get a little bit of extension. Oh, that's better. So extension is that sort of hint of a back bendy movement in our spine. Oh, that's lovely. And I'm just going to do one more. Good. Okay. All right. So hands come to the carriage. I'm going to use my back leg and my arms to push myself away. And we have the little matter of the side arms on this side. So before the last couple of moves, which will be our cool down. So apologies because I'm going to turn my back to you, but I'm going to come into a high kneeling, facing away. So I'm going to be roughly in the middle. I'm just going to change speeds because I'm going to use a slightly lighter spring setting for my arms. So pick the appropriate one. Remember, we're working very small muscles. So I'm going to use my small loop to begin with. Okay. And what we're wanting to do is keep that elbow kind of tucked in towards the ribs. And we're bringing the arm, bringing the hand in front of the body. So we're rotating, we're pivoting, rotating from our shoulder, from the top of our arm bone. And think about keeping that wrist nice and strong. So we're not getting bendy in the wrist, we're nice and strong in that wrist, and we're just getting a bit of rotation. And that rotation is going to come from the top of your arm bone, so the top of your humerus, as we bring that hand in front of the body and open it out. So it's a small movement. It's a small muscle we're targeting here. Good. And then I'm going to shuffle myself around, because now we're going to pop the loop in the opposite hand. So I'm probably actually going to take my big I might take my big loop at this point. So this time I've got the loop in my opposite hand, elbow tucks in, and I'm going to open out to the side. So I've also just shuffled slightly towards my shoulder pads just to make it slightly easier, and I've taken my big loop to make it slightly easier as well, because I do struggle with these, and I'm also just helping myself out a little bit with the initiation of this movement with my opposite hand. Again, small muscles, make sure we're not getting bendy in the wrist. I'm just going to change the grip on my loop here, that's it. Oh, I'm getting a bit bendy. I have to watch that on this side. I probably should do it with a lighter spring, really. Last couple. So yeah, I probably should be on a lighter spring because I'm starting to get a bit of a bend in there, but instead I'm just going to help myself out using the opposite hand. Last one. And back in. Okay, we're going to do that drawing the sword movement. So, opposite hand holds the big loop, and it's going to come down to the front of the opposite hip. So palm is facing the front of the hip here. I'm going to lead with my elbow, so my hand drags across my body, and then I'm going to rotate and hold my hand high in the sky. To come back down, I'm going to fold at the elbow, keeping the elbow high, and the hand will sort of drag the front of the body again, and then the elbow gets pulled. So lead with the elbow, hand drags, open out, hold high in the sky, fold at the elbow, hand drags back over the body towards the opposite hip. Let's go again. Drawing that sword out of its sheath and holding it high in the air. Or Saturday Night Fever, John Travolta. Let's think about the space between the ears and the tops of the shoulders remaining, so we don't want to get that all scrunched up. And I'm just going to do one more. Oh, I'm going to do one more. There we go. And all the way back down. Lovely. Okay, just to finish off, we've got a little bit of feet in straps because I just think that it's not reformer Pilates if we don't have a little bit of feet in straps. I'm just going to put one more spring on, so it is a lot, we are just cooling down now, but I'm just going to have one more spring on, so it's a very lightweight spring. So in fact, I'll go back to what I was using for the abdominal bits in this one. So I've just got one medium spring on, so this is not going to be a heavy leg bit, this is just a bit of cool down, stretchy stuff. So come and have a lay down on your reformer. Your headrest can be in whatever position you want it to be for your neck. We're going to push that carriage away. Again, you're on a really light spring here. So this is just going to be for a little bit of stretching. Let's get one foot in your big loop. Let's get the other foot in your big loop. And we're just going to go for a little bit of light feet in straps with our lift and lower first of all. So we're just going to allow those legs to come up towards the ceiling and then connect with your tailbone, with your bottom muscles. We're going to bring those heels down towards the floor and allow them to lengthen up. So this is a really light spring, so it's making it much more abdominal dominant. But this is just a bit of cool down. Last couple of things, just to mobilise the legs just a little bit and just stretch off some of those hamstrings. And then what we can do on this last one is just give those ropes a little bit of a pull. We'll just get a little bit more of a stretch through the backs of the legs. And if you want to, you can move the ankles a little bit, elbows, those foot elbows. Oh gosh. And that will get you a little bit more of a stretch there. Okay, let's bring the legs out to the side for that nice little adductor stretch. Again, we're on a nice light spring here, so we're not going to get dragged anywhere, but that does mean you are going to have to hold the weight of your own legs. We are using the abdominals just a little bit, even as we work into this cool down. Oh, that's nice. There we go. So this is just a couple of little stretches just to finish off with. And again, on this last one, we can just hold those ropes slightly. Sorry, I'm going to cough. and just allow a bit of stretch into the inner part of the thighs, into your adductor muscles, but probably a bit into your hamstrings as well. Okay. Bringing those legs back and up and in there, and we are going to finish up there. So let's take our feet out of the straps, reconnect with your foot bar, make your way safely off your reformer. Come and have a sit up. So thank you for joining me for that dynamic intermediate class, a little bit advanced for that one as well, wasn't it? Okay. But thanks for joining me. If you haven't done part 1 of that, there is a sort of another section to that class, so you can either do them together or you can do them standalone as a sort of an express class. My name's Hazel Clark, and I'm a Pilates instructor and therapist at Mountain Massage Company in the UK.